So with all the measurements we've done and verifying a couple different ways, this is the fixed way side of the knee, which runs up and down on the fixed side of the column, and across the 18 inches or so here there's about 4 thou. Now there's a variety of ways that could have happened. That could be some wear that's been in there. It could be how I actually scraped the saddle ways. I could have induced a bit of an angle in the entire knee by scraping those. But in the end, the knee itself, the column ways, the saddle ways, they call them gib and guiding way, all need to be relative to each other, square, plumb, all those things. So at this point, I've divided up the guiding way side here into 4 quadrants, and at this end, which is the bottom, I need to take 4 thou out of here. I'm going to try and take 3, 2, and 1. So this section here will get a taper from 0 to 1 thou, 1 thou to 2, 2 to 3, and 3 to 4. And then just to help get that going, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick a spot here. I'm going to try and scrape about a 1 inch square spot there, and I'm just going to try and take that down about 3 thou for now, and then work the rest on that angle and come down into this spot. So it's kind of like a reference spot. I'm going to try and take 3 thou out of there, just get down, get close, get it straight at 3 thou, get it back up and measure it and see where we're at. I scraped it down to about 3 thou. I'm looking for 4 down at this end and nothing at this end down here. And right now, which means this quarter will get scraped 4 times, 3 times, 2 times, and 1 time. That'll be the pattern until I can figure out if I need something different or not. So at this point I've scraped 2 directions on this quarter, 2 directions in this quarter, which carried over into this quarter, so that's actually 2 total each way, 1 total each way. So now I'm just going to scrape this third quarter here once, which will take this, and then I'll scrape all the way through, which will be 1, 2, and 3, and so on. Then you just keep repeating that. And again, I'm trying to pivot it around this corner here and just take 4 thou out of this end. So that's one pass across those 3 sections, and you can see this when you're power scraping, it doesn't take much to take a bunch of material off compared to what I've been doing with hand scraping. So we should be able to get this thing straightened out pretty easily here. So now I'm going to come back through almost not quite 90 degrees to it, but at least a 60-degree angle between the two passes there, and go back through that same 3 sections. This is always difficult to try and get this to look decent on camera here, but because when I scrape and when I look at this, I try to use a single light source at just the right angle to make sure I can see it. So this is the guiding way on the knee, and I've scraped through 3/4 step scraping. This here, this spot right here, that's my witness mark that I took down about 3 thou, so we're not down to it yet. And I'm gonna try and run a couple of passes here, doing some bluing in between, and try and keep this. This is difficult, but I'm going to try and keep this end up here, this last inch or so, just trying to roll, pivot off of this end here as I take more and more as I go down towards the bottom of the knee. So I've got a few scraping cycles completed on the guiding way side, and I wasn't necessarily looking for surface finish or bearing quality just yet, just trying to get it what I thought was straight and flat. So I've got it back up on the table here, and so this is going to be the setup. Got the gauge a little dark in there, but got the gauge in the dovetail, and got the cylindrical square on the table. And so we'll run it up and down there and see what it looks like. I'm hoping that shows up. I'm trying to keep pressure up against the dovetail. That looked pretty good because it didn't move, because the gauge isn't in contact. So I'm just going to bump this in, the square in. Doesn't really matter where the gauge or where the dial indicator is, just looking for movement right now. So it looks like we're inside. Looks like we're inside about 5/10. Maybe closer to 1 thou at the top. So we still got a little bit of work to do to take some more off this top, I think, but it's getting really good now. So with the geometry looking pretty good, now I'm going to try and get some surface finish quality out of this way. So I've switched over to, this is the 4-foot straight edge that I scraped up quite some time ago that I've been using through this whole process. So I've switched over to it, and again, it's hard to see lighting, but the way surface is got some good contact at the, which would be the top of the knee, but that's the point that I'm trying to pivot on, and there's very little contact through here except for out here at the end. So I'm going to start scraping down here and try and tip the straight edge as I go, try and get the blue to show up in the middle here, and then start working on surface quality. So this is the start of a cycle. So I've got the handle off the straight edge because it won't on the angle fit into the dovetail, but so the bluing now, I've got this roller, and this is a hard material, this roller, and you got to work it to get the bluing flat. Crisscross and moving it around. And you start out with a lot of bluing because your surface finish isn't that good, and then you keep working it. You never add blue. Sometimes I just rub it in. And what's nice about the hard roller is it'll actually tell you when you got a piece of debris or something in there. It'll bump over top of it. So now the knee is on its side at the edge of this working table I've got here. So I'm going to put the straight edge in here and blue this up now. I'm just barely moving it side to side, trying to make sure I'm keeping it in full contact with the angle. So what I've been looking for is making sure there's no drastic changes based on what I've been scraping and what I expect to see. And so in this case it looks pretty good because I've still just got contact up here at this end, which is actually the bottom of the knee, which is where we need to bring that in. So now at this point I've got the knee flipped 90 degrees, so I'm going to scrape, I guess I'm going to scrape vertically, I'll call it. So the last cycle I scraped in this direction here, so in this cycle here I'm going to try and scrape in this direction. That was hard to do with that camera there. So now we wipe the way down, get any of the bluing off that we didn't take off. Remember, we're trying to pivot this thing. A little spray. And an old, well-worn file, just to knock off any burrs that are kicked up from the scraper. And then we do that all over again. I've been through a fair amount of cycles. The bluing on the master is getting very light, and spotting is coming in pretty good. This is the top side. Good grouping in there. Get a little light through the middle, but it is showing up. And then down here at this end, which is the bottom, we're getting pretty good coverage there again. So not sure how many more cycles, but I'm going to keep going here until we get a good pattern all the way through it. So the good news is, and there is bad news, that what would have been scraping to change the angle this way on the fixed way side is matching up with what I've seen on the surface plate with the cylindrical square. So we're about a thou away from being square again this way. Unfortunately, and I was pretty sure this was going to happen, but with changing all of that, the gib is now going quite a ways into the slot there, which is going to be a problem. And there seems to be quite a bit more binding. I mean, the last time I tried this out, this thing was going up and down beautifully. So I think what's going to end up happening here, I'm going to get the knee straightened out, and then probably going to have to put the column back on its back and start looking at that fixed way, or the guiding way on the column, and start looking at the angle of the knee way and that interaction, and then work on either fixing the gib or put another new gib in.